The cabin lights glowed softly. Muted chatter filled the air. Overhead bins clicked shut as passengers settled in. Flight 719, New York to London, business class nearly full, and seated quietly by the window in 3A was Jordan Ellis, 17. Calm, well-mannered, dressed in a clean tan jacket and white tee. Headphones resting around his neck, passport tucked into his front pocket. He wasn't nervous. He had flown first class before, but something about flying alone always made him feel like he had to prove something, without saying a word. As Jordan adjusted his seatbelt, a woman's voice cut through the calm, sharp, tense, agitated. "This can't be right. I'm supposed to be in 3A. Heads turned. A white woman, early 50s, perfectly styled blonde hair, wearing a white designer suit and heels that clacked louder than necessary, stood in the aisle, staring down at him. Jordan looked up, polite, confused, but composed. "I think there's a mix-up, ma'am. This is my assigned seat." He lifted his boarding pass slightly, offering it without attitude. She didn't even look at it. She just scoffed. "Honey, I fly this route twice a month. That's my seat. You must be in the wrong cabin." Jordan blinked. One heartbeat. Passed. Then two. "I'm in the right place," he said quietly. 3A. Jordan Ellis. She leaned in slightly, voice lower now, but sharper. "Do you think I don't know when I'm being lied to? Get up, or I'll have the crew remove." "You." The passengers nearby shifted in their seats. A man 2 rows back took out his phone, subtly turning on the camera. The woman, Victoria Langford, frequent flyer, always first to complain, reached forward, and in one swift, careless motion, she slapped Jordan's hand away, knocking the boarding pass clean out of it. The paper fluttered. Jordan froze. His chest rose, then fell. His jaw clenched. But he didn't say a word. The cabin fell silent. Even the crying toddler in row 7 quieted. Everyone was watching now. Victoria folded her arms. "Well, are you going to move, or do I need to call someone?" Jordan didn't flinch, didn't yell, didn't shrink. He calmly bent down, picked up his boarding pass, and handed it, not to her, but to the flight attendant approaching behind her. "Can you please confirm my seat?" he asked, his voice smooth as stone. The attendant scanned it, checked her tablet, paused, eyes widened slightly. She looked back up. "Yes, Mr. Ellis is in the correct seat. 3A. Jordan looked at Victoria. Didn't smile, didn't smirk, he just waited. Victoria blinked. Once. Twice. "Well, someone clearly made a mistake. This doesn't make sense." And just as she turned around, she stopped. Because there, standing directly behind her in the aisle, was a man in a black tailored suit, dark skin, steel gray eyes, presence that could cut through noise without a single word. Malcolm Ellis, founder of Ellis Technologies, Forbes 100, private, precise, and completely, undeniably powerful. He looked down at Victoria, then past her, to his son. "Everything all right, Jordan?" Jordan nodded once. "Yeah, Dad." She just didn't know. Victoria turned white as the clouds outside the window. She looked between the boy and the man, realizing, too late, because she hadn't just tried to remove someone from her seat. She had tried to erase someone she assumed didn't belong. And now, she wasn't just standing in the wrong aisle, she was standing on the edge and of a very public mistake. Before the first-class seat, before the boarding pass, before the slap that stopped a cabin mid-breath, Jordan Ellis was just a boy born into expectations far heavier than any carry-on. He wasn't raised with flashing cameras or red carpets. No, flashing Lamborghinis, no paparazzi birthdays, no fake smiles for fake friends. Because Malcolm Ellis, his father, believed in something deeper than fame. He believed in legacy. "You don't build power by shouting it from rooftops," Malcolm used to say. "You build it in how you walk into a room and how you leave it standing after you're gone." Jordan learned early. Money could buy a seat, but character earned the respect in it. In school, he wasn't the loudest, but his papers, sharp, clear, thoughtful, debate team captain, mathlete champion, volunteer mentor for kids 2 grades younger. Teachers loved him, not because of his last name, but because when Jordan spoke, he didn't talk to impress, he talked to connect. At 17, he already had acceptances from Ivy League schools. Not because his father pulled strings, but because Jordan wrote his own story. In every interview, every essay, every late night studying when it would have been easier to coast. He carried the Ellis name like a quiet shield, never a weapon, never an excuse. And yet, here he was, at gate 12B, seat 3A, face to face with someone who didn't see Jordan Ellis at all, only a skin tone, only an assumption, only a boy she thought she could dismiss like bad turbulence. But Jordan had been raised for this, not to fight fire with fire. "They will come at you loud," his father once said. "You answer with stillness so loud, it echoes longer than any scream." So when Victoria Langford slapped the ticket from his hand, when the cabin held its breath, when the stairs weighed down on his shoulders, Jordan didn't rise in anger. He rose in dignity, because dignity is a language the arrogant never learn, and Jordan spoke it fluently. Now, as his father stood silently behind Victoria, Jordan understood. This wasn't just about one woman, one slap, one gate. It was about what he was taught his whole life. Let them underestimate you. Let them misjudge your seat, your name, your skin. Then, without raising your voice, let them realize who you really are. And Jordan wasn't about to raise his voice. He didn't have to. The truth was already standing, tall, right behind her. The slap itself wasn't hard, not enough to bruise, not enough to leave a mark, but it left something else behind. Silence, heavy, uncomfortable, electric. The woman, Victoria Langford, still stood there, hand trembling slightly, chest heaving under her pristine white suit. The passengers didn't move, didn't breathe. Everyone just watched. Because sometimes it's not the force of the slap, but the weight of what it means. Jordan sat back in his seat, calm, still, unshaken. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply straightened the boarding pass that had fluttered into his lap and laid it across his knee with a grace that screamed louder than any angry word could. Across the aisle, a man in business casual muttered under his breath, "Did she just—" A woman 2 rows back whispered to her husband, "Is this really happening?" Kya. Few phones tilted upward discreetly. Recording. Because some moments, history demands witnesses. Victoria, still rattled but digging deeper into her entitlement, barked, "I want this boy removed. Now!" Her voice cracked slightly at the end, not from lack of conviction, from fear, because deep down, even if she didn't know why yet, she sensed this time would be different. The flight attendant approached carefully, young, nervous, eyes darting between Jordan, Victoria, and the silent man in the black suit standing behind them. "Ma'am, please, let's check the boarding." Passes calmly. Jordan handed his without a word. The attendant scanned it. Beep. Confirmation. Seat 3A. Jordan Ellis. No mistake. No mix-up. He belonged there. Victoria's face flushed a deep red. Equal parts rage and humiliation. She tried to recover. "Well, he must have switched seats. I know what I booked." Jordan finally spoke. Soft. Measured. "You assumed I didn't belong because it made you more comfortable than asking." The words didn't shout, they didn't accuse, they simply hung there. Undeniable, like gravity. Victoria opened her mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to retreat. But she didn't get the chance, because that's when Malcolm Ellis stepped forward. His presence filled the aisle, not because he raised his voice, but because he didn't need to. He placed a hand gently on Jordan's shoulder, looked down at him, proud, then turned his gaze to Victoria, eyes steady, voice even. Is there a reason my son should move from the seat we paid for? Victoria stumbled over her words. I didn't know he was. Malcolm cut her off, not with sharpness, with finality. You didn't know because you didn't care to look. Another silence. This one different, not awkward, accountable. Passengers began murmuring, soft but clear. One woman in row 5 said, "Disgusting." A man in business class muttered, "Unbelievable." Victoria's shoulders sagged. The attendant, seeing no way out, quietly asked, "Ms. Langford, would you like to take your assigned seat now?" Victoria didn't answer. She simply turned, head low, and stumbled back down the aisle. And the flight? It hadn't even left the ground yet, but a whole lot of air had already cleared. Because in that moment, in that narrow cabin aisle, at 35,000 feet of pressure yet to come, the world learned something new about Jordan Ellis. He wasn't just a boy in a seat. He was a lesson, and they were all about to take notes. The aisle felt narrower now, smaller, tighter, as if the air itself realized whose shadow it had just stepped into. Malcolm Ellis. Not announced, not escorted, just standing there. And somehow, everyone knew he wasn't just another businessman. It was the way he moved. Or rather, how he didn't have to. Victoria turned halfway down the aisle, caught his gaze, and froze. Because there are some people you can't lie to. You can't talk over. You can't dismiss with a sharp tongue and sharper heels. Malcolm took one step forward, measured, deliberate, the kind of step that says, "I am here now, and I see everything." The flight attendant swallowed hard. Passengers leaned in, silent, phones still recording, yes. But even without the lenses, this moment would have seared itself into memory. Malcolm didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Instead, he spoke to the air between them. Solid, heavy, unbreakable. You judged my son without knowing his name. Without checking his boarding. Pass. Without asking a single question, he paused. Let the truth sit there. Soak into the carpet, the seats, the skin of everyone listening. Victoria tried to find words, tried to patch the wreckage with excuses. I didn't know who he was. Malcolm lifted a hand, not threatening, just final. You don't respect someone because of who their father is. You respect them because of who they are. Jordan watched from his seat, silent, steady, learning. Not just about defense, but about defining presence. Victoria's hands fidgeted with her handbag strap, the weight of the moment finally settling on her, because no apology, no corporate card, no entitled smile could erase the truth Malcolm had laid bare. The car. Flight attendant, now trembling slightly, tried to salvage protocol. Mr. Ellis, sir, we deeply apologize. Would you like to relocate to another seat? Malcolm smiled, a slow, almost pitying smile. No, thank you. My son has already arrived where he needs to be. Jordan glanced out the window. The sky still waiting. The runway stretched ahead, and somehow it all felt cleaner, clearer. Victoria, head lowered, shuffled back to her assigned seat. No further protests, no more claims of superiority, just the long, heavy walk of someone realizing it was never about the seat. It was about the respect they forgot to give. And Malcolm? He didn't gloat, didn't strut. He simply sat down in 3B beside his son, adjusted his cufflinks, leaned slightly toward Jordan, and said, just loud enough for him alone to hear, "You handled yourself better than half the men I know." Jordan smiled, small but real, because in that instant, he understood something deeper than money or boarding groups or first-class privileges. True power was never about who shouts the loudest. It was about who stays standing when others try to sit you down. The flight attendant's voice crackled over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taxiing shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated." Normal words, spoken 1,000 times a day. But today, the words felt different, because every person in that cabin wasn't looking at their safety card. They were looking at her, Victoria Langford, the woman who had slapped, accused, assumed, and now, she couldn't even meet a single pair of eyes. She clutched her designer handbag tight against her lap, shrinking into her seat in row 7C, no longer striding through the aisle like a queen surveying her kingdom. Now she sat, small, diminished, not because someone shouted her down, not because anyone publicly scolded her, no, because her own actions put her there. Jordan Ellis remained in 3A window seat, calm, watching the tarmac roll by outside as the plane crept toward takeoff. He hadn't gloated. He hadn't so much as turned around. And yet, he had commanded the room better than any tantrum ever could. Passengers whispered, soft but unmistakable. Did you see the way she treated him? And the father. Oh man, the control. That kid's got more dignity than most adults I know. Someone tapped on the armrest between Jordan and Malcolm, a middle-aged woman, professional, polished. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Just wanted to say, your son handled that better than most grown men would." Malcolm smiled. Jordan nodded. Simple, gracious. Across the aisle, a young man in business attire lifted his phone subtly, tweeted, "When you find out you slapped the son of a billionaire because you couldn't mind your manners." Flight 719, respect eyes free. Within minutes, it spread like wildfire. Screens flickered all around the plane. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. The story wasn't just leaving Gate 12B. It was about to leave the stratosphere. Victoria hunched lower in her seat, pretending to scroll her phone, pretending she couldn't feel the heat of her own actions catching up with her. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts. One lingered slightly longer near Victoria's row, offered a tight, polite smile. No warmth, professional courtesy only, nothing more. Because respect, it's earned, and some lessons come with turbulence you cause yourself. As the plane lifted off into the blue morning sky, Jordan leaned back, closed his eyes, not in exhaustion, but in peace, because he knew. He had won the only battle that mattered, not against her, not against assumptions, but against the impulse to let anger define him. Across from him, Malcolm opened a newspaper, turned to the business section, and smiled quietly at the headline he already knew would be rewritten. Power isn't always loud. Meanwhile, far behind them in the cabin, Victoria sat alone, awake, learning, finally, that humiliation is not the same as justice. But sometimes, it's the first step toward understanding why respect must never be optional. 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, clouds stretched like endless rivers below them. Engines hummed a low, steady rhythm. Cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow. And in that quiet cocoon of altitude and time, something had shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't announced, but you could feel it. In the way conversations paused when Jordan passed by to use the restroom. In the way flight attendants offered extra care Small nods, real smiles, not the mechanical ones. In the way passengers tilted their heads slightly lower when he walked the aisle. Not out of fear, out of respect, because dignity doesn't demand attention, it commands it. Back at his seat, Jordan scrolled through his phone. Notifications. Pinged in clusters, mentions, messages, screenshots of tweets. Clips already making rounds, the story spreading. But he didn't click. He didn't need to see it go viral to know that something real had already happened. Here. Now. Across the aisle, an older man with silver hair leaned over, quiet voice, measured. Words. "Son, I watched the whole thing. You showed the kind of strength most people spend a lifetime trying to learn." Jordan nodded, polite but humble. The man smiled. "And you didn't even have to raise your voice." Jordan smiled back. "Just a little. Sometimes you don't need to," he said. Farther back, whispers floated. The way he handled that, legendary. You could tell he comes from real class. That woman had no idea who she messed with. Meanwhile, in row 7C, Victoria Langford sat stiff, eyes down, face flushed. Every small kindness the flight attendants gave Jordan, every quiet murmur of admiration, was a reminder. Not just of what she had done, but of what she had revealed about herself. Because respect isn't something you buy with a first-class ticket. It's something you carry with you, or you don't. Malcolm Ellis sipped his coffee. Watched. His son with the careful pride of a man who knows the world will test him again and again, and knows he'll pass. Because Jordan wasn't armored in rage. He was wrapped in unshakable identity. As dinner service started, a flight attendant placed a dish gently in front of Jordan, smiled warmly. "Compliments of the captain, sir." Jordan looked up, slightly startled. The attendant winked. "The real captain," she added in a whisper. Jordan chuckled under his breath. So did Malcolm, because moments like this, they weren't handed out. They were earned by being still, by being clear, by being undeniably worthy. Even when someone tries to erase you before asking your name. As trays clinked and laughter rose in quiet waves around the cabin, Jordan leaned his head back against the seat. He wasn't angry. He wasn't resentful. He was anchored, rooted in who he was, rooted deeper than the altitude they flew through. And far behind him, buried in her seat, Victoria realized it wasn't the billionaire father she had to fear. It was the unbreakable son she never saw coming. The cabin settled into that soft, dreamlike quiet that only happens mid-flight. Some passengers dozed, others tapped lazily on tablets. The lights dimmed low, casting the plane in a muted gold. But at 3A and 3B, a conversation was about to happen that no one else could hear, and it would stay with Jordan Ellis far longer than any applause or headline ever would. Malcolm set down his coffee cup, leaned back, watched his son staring quietly out the window. Silhouetted against the endless stretch of clouds, for a moment he just let the silence sit. Let it breathe, because real lessons, they're not shouted, they're offered. Finally, Malcolm spoke, low, steady, like laying bricks one word at a time. "You did good today." Jordan didn't turn from the window, just smiled slightly. "Didn't feel like I did much." Malcolm chuckled, not unkindly. "Exactly." Jordan turned now, confused. Malcolm continued. "Everyone expects you to fight back loud. Get angry, make a scene. But real power," he tapped 2 fingers against his heart, "it's in choosing when to speak, and even more in knowing when you don't have to." Jordan thought about that, about the tightening in his chest when Victoria slapped his ticket away, the heat in his blood, the sting of humiliation, and the voice inside him, the one that whispered, "Prove yourself! Show them!" But he hadn't listened to that voice. He had listened to a deeper one, the one his father had planted there years ago. Malcolm leaned in a little closer, voice even softer. "Son, people will try to define you by your silence. They'll say you were weak if you don't fight the way they understand. They'll say you were angry if you raise your voice at all." He smiled sadly. "You're not responsible for their assumptions. You're responsible for your standard." Jordan nodded slowly, felt it settle inside him, felt it root. Because Malcolm wasn't just talking about airplanes or rich bullies. He was talking about life, about boardrooms, negotiations, leadership, about standing still in rooms that want you to shrink. Malcolm sat back, crossed one ankle over his knee. "Let the world define success however it wants. You define yours by how well you stay standing when they try to sit you down." Outside the window, the sky burned a soft orange. Sunset. Chasing them across the Atlantic, a reminder that light always catches up, even when you're thousands of miles from home. Jordan took a breath, and for the first time since the gate, since the slap, since the whispering eyes, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel humiliated. He felt steady, unshakable. He turned back to his father, met his gaze. "Thanks, Dad." Malcolm just nodded. Simple. Enough. No need for a bigger moment. Because sometimes, the biggest shifts happen in the quiet between words, and at 35,000 feet above a world obsessed with noise, Jordan Ellis learned that presence was louder than any slap could ever be. Morning light broke through the airplane windows, soft, golden, gentle. The cabin began to stir, seatbelts clicked, announcements crackled. A new day was waiting outside. Jordan Ellis sat up straighter. His mind was quiet, not numb, not distracted, focused, rooted. Because after last night's conversation with his father, he wasn't just a passenger on a plane anymore. He was carrying something bigger. A standard, a posture, a promise. The flight attendant approached their row, smiling, genuinely this time. "Mr. Ellis," she said quietly, handing Jordan a folded slip of paper, "with compliments from the captain." Jordan opened it. Inside, handwritten, "Respect is not optional. Thank you for reminding us." Signed simply, Captain Reynolds Jordan tucked the note into his jacket pocket, not to save it as proof, but as a reminder that the world notices, even when you don't demand it to. As the plane began to descend, passengers gathered their belongings. A few gave Jordan nods as they passed his seat, small gestures, real ones. A woman squeezed his shoulder gently as she walked by. A businessman murmured, "Stay solid, kid." Jordan didn't beam with pride. He didn't puff out his chest. He just accepted it with a quiet nod, because he understood now. True power doesn't announce itself. It just is. Malcolm watched him out of the corner of his eye, smiling slightly, because he knew Jordan wasn't just learning how to sit in first class, he was learning how to carry first class within himself, no matter what seat, no matter what room. As they taxied to the gate, the pilot made a final announcement. "Thank you for flying with us today, and to our young leaders on board, keep showing us how it's done." A few more passengers smiled Jordan's way. The air felt different, lighter, changed. Jordan stood up, collected his things. He didn't rush. He didn't hang back either. He simply moved forward, like someone who knew exactly where he belonged. As he stepped into the jet bridge, he felt his phone buzz, a news alert. He opened it. The headline, "Teen handles racial bias incident with grace, teaches a masterclass at 17. A photo of him, blurred in the background. Malcolm's hand on his shoulder. Victoria's stunned face barely visible. Jordan shook his head, smiling slightly. He hadn't set out to make a headline. He had just stayed standing, and somehow that was enough to move the world. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, walked beside his father. No spotlight, no announcement, just two men, young and old, moving through a world that was just a little better because one of them chose not to flinch when it mattered. And that was a kind of power no one could ever take away. The wheels touched down with a soft jolt. London, grey skies, misty air, a new city waiting just beyond the glass. But Jordan Ellis wasn't thinking about sightseeing. He was thinking about how you finish a journey matters just as much as how you start it. Passengers stood, stretching, gathering coats and briefcases. Jordan remained seated, waiting, watching, not because he was hesitant, but because he understood now. Leadership is patience, even when you've earned the right to rush, The aisle finally cleared. Jordan stood, rolled his small carry-on behind him. Malcolm Ellis followed, calm and unhurried. Two shadows moving through the cabin like a current under the noise. As they reached the front, the flight crew stood lined up, flight attendants, the captain, even a senior manager from the airline who had come on board. All of them waiting, not out of duty, out of recognition. The captain, a tall woman with salt and pepper hair, stepped forward first. She extended her hand. "Mr. Ellis," she said, addressing Jordan directly, "thank you for showing the world that dignity. Travels well." Jordan shook her hand, firm, gracious, no lingering. Then came a murmur from behind the gate, people snapping photos, someone whispering, "That's the kid from the plane." "That's him. That's Jordan Ellis." Jordan kept walking, not slowing, not posing, not soaking in the attention, because he understood something that most people twice his age still didn't. The goal isn't to be seen, it's to walk in a way that's worth seeing. Malcolm caught up beside him, said quietly, just for Jordan to hear, "You made me proud, son." Jordan smiled, not big, but deep, the kind that stays stitched into your ribs long after the cameras are gone. As they passed through customs, a young boy, maybe 9 or 10, stood in line with his mother. He wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big and clutched a travel-worn backpack. When Jordan walked by, the boy's eyes widened. He tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, I want to be like him." Jordan heard it, didn't turn, but his heart caught for half a breath. Because in that single whisper, he heard the weight of the future, the responsibility, the honor, the ripple effect of choosing every single day to hold your head high when the world tells you not to. Outside, a black town car waited at the curb. Jordan and Malcolm climbed in. The D-key door closed with a soft click. As the car pulled away into the London fog, Jordan looked out the window and knew today wasn't about survival. It was about arrival. He hadn't just survived the slap. He hadn't just handled the stairs. He had walked through the fire and come out not louder, not angrier, stronger, because grace isn't weakness. Grace is armor, the kind that never cracks, even under pressure, especially under pressure. The black town car weaved through London streets. Rain misted the windows, horn blasts, crosswalks, life bustling everywhere. But inside the car, it was calm, steady, just like Jordan Ellis. He scrolled through his phone as they rode. Headlines blurred. Past, "Teen teaches $1 billion lesson in dignity." Jordan Ellis, grace under pressure. The quiet power that silenced a plane. He read none of them, because he knew something that took others decades to learn. Headlines fade. Character doesn't. Beside him, Malcolm Ellis watched silently, proud, but not because of the attention, because of the restraint, because Jordan hadn't let a moment define him. He had defined the moment. They arrived at the hotel. Valets rushed to open doors, tip hats, offer umbrellas. Jordan stepped out first. Not rushed. Not timid. Just present. A reporter waited by the revolving doors. Young, eager, holding a mic out like an offering. "Mr. Ellis, do you have any comment on the incident from your flight?" Jordan paused, for half a heartbeat, long enough for the air to stretch, long enough for everyone to lean in. Then he said simply, "Kindness costs nothing, but assuming someone's worth can cost you everything." And with that, he turned away. No follow-up, no long speech, just truth, left behind like footprints. Solid, permanent. Later that night, in the quiet of a hotel suite 24 floors above the city, Jordan stood at the window, watching headlights weave like rivers of light through the dark. Malcolm handed him a glass of water, sat down in an armchair. "You know," Malcolm said, "I used to think legacy was about how many people knew your name." Jordan smiled, waiting. Malcolm continued, "It's not. Legacy is about how people behave after you leave the room." Jordan let that sink in, felt it, settle under his skin like a new layer of armor, invisible, unbreakable. The next morning they boarded another flight. New city, new gate, new people. No one pointed, no one whispered, and even if they had, Jordan wouldn't have noticed. He wasn't looking for validation. He was carrying something else, his standard. As the plane took off, he leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes, listened to the hum of the engines, and smiled to himself, because he knew, you don't need to raise your voice to change the world. You just have to walk through it with enough grace that it can't stay the same after you pass by. The end.